There's a pain like no other. Watching someone you gave everything to treat you like you're nothing. It cuts deeper than a knife, burns hotter than fire. I've carried that weight for nearly 2 years. Before I explain how it all collapsed, how I made my son feel the void he left in me, know this: I tried. But when I needed even a drop of that same care, he showed his true self. I lost my home, my dignity, almost my will to live. But in the end, he lost much more. Stay with me and you'll see. Some debts can only be paid in consequences. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. A lot of you have been asking for this story, and trust me when I say, it's not what you're expecting. My name is Karen Morgan. At 58, I thought I understood the rhythm of my life. The highs, the lows, the in-betweens. I've worked in corporate accounting for over 30 years, lived in the same modest 3-bedroom house in Connecticut since my divorce 25 years ago, and raised 2 children largely on my own. My daughter Eliza lives across the country in Portland with her wife and their twins. And then there's my son Caleb. Caleb was always the bright star, burning with ambition. When he was just 7, he announced at the dinner table that he was going to be a lawyer, like the ones on TV who always win. I remember laughing, not at his dream, but at the absolute certainty in his voice. From that moment on, it was all he talked about. Law school, big firms, corner offices. I supported that dream in every way I could. Extra tutoring when he struggled with standardized tests. Driving him to mock trial competitions on weekends. Working overtime to afford the college application prep courses. When he got into Yale for his undergraduate degree, I felt like all our sacrifices had been worth it. "Mom, I did it," he said, holding the acceptance letter, tears in his eyes. "We did it." That "we" meant everything to me. 4 years later, when he was accepted to Columbia Law, I knew I couldn't afford it on my salary alone. But Caleb had worked so hard, come so far. "I'll figure it out," I told him over the phone. "You just focus on becoming the best lawyer you can be." The next day, I applied for a second mortgage on my house. The loan officer looked at my income, my age, my existing debt, and frowned. "Ms. Morgan, this is a significant financial risk at your stage in life," he said. "My son is worth every risk," I replied, signing the papers without hesitation. For 3 years, I worked 60-hour weeks. I cut every corner. No vacations, no new clothes, no dinners out. I sold my mother's antique jewelry piece by piece. I picked up weekend bookkeeping for small businesses. Every extra dollar went to Columbia Law School, to Caleb's apartment in New York, to his textbooks and living expenses. During those years, our calls grew shorter. His visits home became rarer. But I told myself it was natural. He was building his future, networking with the right people, studying for exams that would determine his career. The day he graduated, I sat in the audience wearing a dress I'd bought 20 years earlier for a company Christmas party, freshly dry-cleaned and altered to fit my older frame. I watched him cross that stage, tall and handsome in his cap and gown, and I felt a pride so fierce it brought tears to my eyes. "That's my son," I whispered to the stranger sitting next to me. "That's my boy." After the ceremony, I waited in the crowd, searching for his face. When I finally found him, he was surrounded by classmates in expensive watches and designer shoes. I approached hesitantly, conscious of my dated dress and sensible shoes. "Caleb!" I called, waving. He looked over, and for a split second, I saw something flicker across his face. Not happiness, not gratitude, but something closer to embarrassment? Then he smiled, excused himself from his friends, and came over to give me a quick hug. "Hey, Mom, you made it." "Of course I made it. I wouldn't miss this for the world. I'm so proud of you." "Thanks," he said, glancing back at his friends. "Listen, there's this dinner thing with some of the firms tonight. We should probably catch up tomorrow instead." "Oh," I said, swallowing my disappointment. "Sure. That makes sense. You need to network." "Exactly. These connections could determine my whole career path." I nodded, understanding but still hurt. "I'm staying at that little hotel we found online, the one near—" "I'll text you," he interrupted. "We'll figure it out." He never texted. The next day, I received a call instead. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Things have been crazy. One of the partners at Hartman and Klein invited me to brunch, and then there's this boat thing on the Hudson with some alumni." "It's fine," I said, even though it wasn't. "Maybe dinner tonight?" "Tonight's the official graduation dinner. But hey, I'm moving back to Hartford next month to start at the firm there. We'll have plenty of time to catch up then, okay?" I flew home alone, telling myself that his success was what mattered, that the distance was temporary, that once he settled into his career, things would normalize between us. That summer, he moved back to Connecticut, not to Hartford, but to Westport, an affluent coastal town 40 minutes from my modest neighborhood. He bought a sleek condo with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. I visited once, bringing a homemade lasagna and some simple housewarming gifts: dish towels, potted herbs for his kitchen windowsill, a framed photo of us from his college graduation. "Mom, you didn't have to bring all this," he said, taking the lasagna but leaving the gifts in the hallway. "I wanted to," I replied, looking around at his sparse, modern furnishings. "This place is beautiful." "It's a start," he said with a shrug. "The senior associates all have actual houses. In 5 years, that's where I'll be." We ate the lasagna on his balcony, drinking wine that cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. He talked about the firm, his colleagues, the cases he hoped to work on. I listened, asked questions, tried to connect with this new version of my son. Sharper, harder around the edges, more focused on appearance than I remembered. When I mentioned the mortgage payments were becoming difficult with rising interest rates, he changed the subject. "Have you ever tried Pilates? One of the partner's wives teaches it. She says it's transformative for women our age." Our age. As if we were peers. As if I wasn't the woman who had held him through night terrors and chicken pox, who had worked 2 jobs to keep him in private school, who had mortgaged her future for his present. That fall, Waverly Mutual, where I'd worked for 22 years, announced a reorganization. They were outsourcing the accounting department. My position, along with 30 others, would be eliminated. "We value your years of service," the HR director said, sliding the severance package across the table. "And we hope this will help with the transition." The package was fair: 6 months' salary, extended health benefits, but not enough. Not with the second mortgage, not with the rising cost of living, not at my age in a job market that valued youth and technological skills I was still mastering. I applied for positions everywhere: banks, retail accounting departments, small businesses. I had interviews, but they always ended the same way. "We've decided to go with a candidate whose experience better aligns with our current needs." Translation: someone younger, someone cheaper. By March, I was dipping into my retirement savings. By June, those too were depleted. The foreclosure notice arrived on a Tuesday. Cream-colored paper, official letterhead, 30 days to bring the account current or vacate the property. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Caleb had done his homework, where we'd played Scrabble on Friday nights, where I'd helped him complete his law school applications. I thought about calling Eliza, but with the twins and her wife's recent health issues, I couldn't bear to add to her burdens. So I called Caleb instead. "Morgan speaking," he answered, his voice crisp and professional. "Caleb, it's Mom." A pause. "Mom, hey, I'm actually heading into a meeting. Can I call you back?" "It's important," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need help." Another pause, longer this time. "What kind of help?" I explained the situation, the layoff, the failed job search, the foreclosure notice. My voice broke only once, when I mentioned possibly selling the house, the home where he'd grown up. "I just need a little time to get back on my feet," I finished. "Maybe a small loan to cover the mortgage for a few months while I—" "Mom," he interrupted, his voice lowered as if he was cupping his hand over the phone. "I'm just starting out. I have student loans, condo payments, professional expenses. I can't just—" "I'm not asking for a handout," I said quickly. "Just a loan. I'll pay you back every cent." "It's not a good time financially," he said. "Maybe you should consider downsizing? Renting an apartment might be more manageable at this stage." "At my age," he meant. "At my level of failure." I don't have the credit for a new lease, I admitted, the words tasting bitter. I've tried. Silence stretched between us, filled with everything he wasn't saying. Maybe, I swallowed hard, maybe I could stay with you. Just for a little while. A few weeks at most until I can… Stay with me? He sounded genuinely shocked, as if I'd suggested something obscene. Mom, that's not… I mean, my place is barely big enough for one person. It was a 2-bedroom luxury condo with a home office and a terrace. I wouldn't be in your way, I said, hating the pleading note in my voice. I could help with cooking, cleaning. It's not that, he cut in. It's… Look, I'm establishing myself at the firm. I host colleagues, networking events. I'm up for junior partner next year. I understand, I said, even though I didn't. Not really. He cleared his throat. Mom, my colleagues can't know I'm letting a failure stay with me. You're bad for my image. The words came out in a rush, clinical and cold. I've worked too hard to get where I am. I can't risk it. I'm sorry. A failure. That's what I was to him now. Not his mother, not his supporter, not the woman who had sacrificed everything. A failure who might contaminate his carefully constructed image. I see, I said, my voice hollow. I won't bother you again. I hung up before he could respond, before he could hear the sob building in my throat. I sat at the kitchen table until darkness fell, staring at the foreclosure notice, at the framed photos on the wall, at the life I had built and was now watching crumble. That night, something hardened inside me. A resolve, a clarity of purpose. As I packed the first of many boxes, I made myself a promise. Caleb Morgan would learn that actions have consequences, that debts, even those between mother and son, always come due, and I would be the one to collect. The day I left my home for the last time, I didn't cry. I watched as the bank representative changed the locks, handed me the final paperwork, and offered a rehearsed apology that meant nothing. 25 years of memories locked behind a door I could no longer open. I stood on the sidewalk with 3 suitcases and a box of photo albums, waiting for the Uber that would take me to the extended stay motel I'd booked with the last of my credit. You need help with those bags, ma'am? The driver asked when he arrived. I've been carrying heavier things for years, I replied. The motel room was clean but depressing. Beige walls, generic artwork, the faint smell of industrial cleaner that couldn't quite mask decades of transient occupancy. I unpacked only what I needed and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. I had exactly $432 in my checking account, no job prospects, and nowhere else to go. I scrolled through my contacts, pausing at Eliza's name. My daughter would help if she could. I knew that. But with twins under 5 and her wife still recovering from cancer treatments, she was already stretched thin. The last thing she needed was to worry about her mother's housing crisis. Instead, I opened my browser and navigated to Caleb's firm's website. There he was, in the Rising Stars section. Caleb Morgan, associate, Yale and Columbia Law, photographed in a sleek suit with the confident smile of someone who believed he'd earned everything he had. You're bad for my image, he'd said. Those words became my mantra in the days that followed. They echoed as I applied for jobs at grocery stores and call centers. They burned in my ears when I qualified for emergency food assistance. They followed me to the community center where I used their computers to search for affordable housing. It was at that community center that I met Diane, a social worker who specialized in helping seniors in financial crisis. You're actually not alone in this, she told me during our first meeting. I see people in your situation every week. Professionals who did everything right, saved what they could, but got caught in circumstances beyond their control. My circumstances have a name and a law degree, I said, surprising myself with the bitterness in my voice. Diane didn't judge. Instead, she helped me apply for subsidized senior housing, connected me with job placement services for older workers, and invited me to a support group that met on Wednesday evenings. Just people sharing stories and resources, she explained. Sometimes it helps to know you're not the only one navigating rough waters. I went reluctantly, expecting tearful confessions and empty platitudes. What I found instead were people like me, proud, capable, angry, a former nurse whose medical bills had bankrupted her after a heart attack, A widower whose pension had evaporated in a corporate merger. A teacher who'd lost everything caring for her adult son with disabilities. "I raised 3 children on my own," said Rita, a former office manager with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. "Put them all through college. Now 2 won't even take my calls, and the third only calls when he needs money. Children today think parents are disposable." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. "My son has a guest room in his house that's never been used," said Howard, the widower. "Know what he told me when I asked to stay there? That they're saving it for when his in-laws visit. Twice a year, for 3 days." More nods, more shared indignation. For the first time since Caleb's rejection, I felt something other than despair. Solidarity has a way of transforming personal pain into collective purpose. After the meeting, Rita approached me. "You've got that look," she said. "The one that says you're not just sad, you're planning something." "Am I that transparent?" I asked. "To me? Yes. To the kids who broke us? No. They never really see us, do they?" She wrote her number on a scrap of paper. "Call me if you want to talk strategy." The next day, I received a text message from Caleb, the first contact since our call 6 weeks earlier. "Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation. I may have been a bit harsh. Let me know if you found a place to stay." C. No apology. No real acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just enough concern to alleviate his guilt without actually offering help. I didn't respond. 3 days later, another text. "Mom? Just checking in. Getting a little worried." I deleted it. When the third message came, "Seriously, Mom, at least let me know you're okay." I blocked his number. It was petty, perhaps, but it felt like the first time I'd exercised any control in months. And it was working. According to my daughter, who called to check on me, Caleb had been trying to reach me with increasing urgency. "He says you're not answering his texts," Eliza said. "He sounds worried." "Did he tell you what happened?" I asked. A pause. "He said you asked for money and he couldn't help at the time." "That's not what happened," I said, and told her everything. The foreclosure, my plea for temporary shelter, his cruel dismissal. "Jesus, Mom, I had no idea." Her voice caught. "Why didn't you call me? You could have come to stay with us." "You have enough on your plate," I said. And honestly, I needed time to figure things out on my own. "Where are you staying? Do you need money?" "We don't have much, but—" "I'm okay for now," I assured her. "I've applied for senior housing, and I have a lead on a part-time job at the library. I'll be fine." "I'm so angry at him," she said. "I'm going to call him right now and—" "Don't," I interrupted. "This is between Caleb and me." After we hung up, I stared at the motel ceiling, turning our conversation over in my mind. Eliza's instinct had been immediate. To help. To offer what she could, even when she had little to spare. It was what family did. What I had always done for my children. What Caleb had refused to do for me. That night, I called Rita. "I need to understand something about my son," I said when she answered. "I need to know who he's become." "That's not the same as revenge," she pointed out. "No," I agreed. "It's just the first step." The next day, I created a new email account under a false name and sent an inquiry to Caleb's law firm, expressing interest in their estate planning services. When they responded with a list of attorneys specializing in that area, I specifically requested Caleb Morgan, mentioning that he had been recommended by a close friend. 2 days later, I had an appointment. Not with Caleb directly, but with him and a senior partner who would be overseeing the consultation. I spent $89. I couldn't spare on a simple but professional outfit from a consignment shop, styled my hair differently than I usually wore it, and purchased non-prescription glasses that changed the shape of my face. Standing outside the gleaming office building, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For weeks, I had been a victim of circumstances, of my son's callousness, of systems designed to discard people like me. Today, I was taking control of the narrative. "You're bad for my image," he had said. I straightened my shoulders and walked through the revolving door, ready to show him exactly what kind of image I could project, and exactly what kind of mother he had underestimated. The reception area of Hartwell, Pierce & Associates was designed to impress and intimidate. Marble floors, mahogany panels, abstract art worth more than most people's annual salaries. The receptionist wore a headset and the cultivated smile of someone who professionally judged worthiness. "Eleanor Jenkins for Mr. Morgan," I said, using the name from my email. "I have an appointment regarding estate planning." "Of course, Ms. Jenkins. Please have a seat. Would you like coffee? Water?" "Water would be lovely," I replied, settling into a leather chair that probably cost more than my first car. I observed the office dynamics while I waited. Junior associates hurried through with purposeful strides, carrying leather portfolios and expensive coffee. Support staff moved with efficient deference. A silver-haired man in a tailored suit emerged from the hallway, laughing with a younger colleague about someone's new boat. When Caleb appeared in the reception area, I felt a jolt of recognition so visceral I nearly stood up. He looked polished, confident, success personified in his custom suit and Italian shoes. He was speaking quietly to another associate, completely unaware of my presence. The casual way he carried himself, entitled and assured, made something harden inside me. This was the man who had looked me in the eye and called me a failure. A moment later, an older man approached the reception desk, speaking to the woman behind it before turning to scan the waiting area. His eyes landed on me. "Ms. Jenkins?" he asked, extending his hand. "Walter Pierce. I'll be sitting in with Mr. Morgan on your consultation today." I rose, clasping his hand firmly. "Thank you for making time for me, Mr. Pierce." "Caleb," Walter called, waving my son over. "Our 2 o'clock is here." Caleb turned, professional smile already in place as he approached. "Ms. Jenkins, Caleb Morgan. I understand you're interested in estate planning services." Our eyes met, and I saw nothing. No flicker of recognition, no moment of doubt. His gaze passed over me as it would any middle-aged client of moderate means. I was invisible to him in the most complete way. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I have some complex family situations to address." He nodded sympathetically. "Family complications are exactly why proper estate planning is essential. Please follow us to the conference room." I walked behind them down the corridor, past framed law degrees and photographs of partners shaking hands with judges and politicians. Caleb's office door was open as we passed. Corner placement, window view, fast track. The conference room was intimidating in its sterility. Glass table, ergonomic chairs, a wall of law books that probably hadn't been opened in years, given digital resources. "Before we begin," Walter said once we were seated, "I should mention that Caleb is one of our rising stars in estate law. He's already handled several high-value trusts and has a particular talent for navigating difficult family dynamics." "How fortunate," I murmured, looking directly at my son. "Finding someone who understands family obligations is rare these days." "Indeed," Walter agreed, oblivious to any subtext. "Now, tell us about your situation." I had prepared for this. Crafted a story similar enough to the truth to be convincing, different enough to obscure my identity. "I'm a widow with 2 adult children," I began. "I've worked in finance for 30 years, built a modest but comfortable life. Recently, I've been diagnosed with a condition that may leave me unable to manage my affairs. Not cancer, not yet, just the possibility, the shadow of something ominous." "I'm sorry to hear that," Caleb said, his expression calibrated to show appropriate concern without overstepping professional boundaries. "These things happen," I replied. "The issue is that I've supported my son extensively throughout his education and career. Significant financial support, second mortgage, liquidated investments. I'm concerned that if my condition worsens and I need care, he may not reciprocate that support." Walter nodded understandingly. "Unfortunately, filial responsibility is more moral than legal in most states. My daughter would help without question," I continued, "but she has limited resources. My son, however, has done very well for himself. Lives in a luxury condo, works at a prestigious firm." I smiled thinly. "Not unlike this one." Caleb shifted in his seat, a fleeting discomfort crossing his face. "And you're concerned about protecting your remaining assets while ensuring your care needs are met?" "I'm concerned about justice," I said, my voice hardening slightly before I caught myself. I want to ensure that my contributions to my son's success are recognized, regardless of his willingness to acknowledge them. Walter leaned forward. There are several approaches we could take. A trust with specific conditions, perhaps, or structuring your estate in a way that incentivizes certain behavioral outcomes. What Mr. Pierce means, Caleb interjected with practiced smoothness, is that we can create legal structures that protect your interests while encouraging family support. But I should caution, using estate planning as leverage in family disputes often backfires emotionally. I'm not interested in emotional outcomes, I said, echoing his clinical tone. I'm interested in fairness. Something in my phrasing must have triggered a memory. Caleb's brow furrowed slightly, and for a heart-stopping moment, I thought he might recognize me. But then his professional mask slipped back into place. Of course, I apologize if I overstepped. The meeting continued for another 45 minutes, with Walter outlining various legal strategies and Caleb taking notes on a leather-bound pad. I asked pointed questions about filial responsibility laws, about the possibility of recouping educational expenses, about documenting family loans. Each question was a carefully placed needle, designed to make Caleb contemplate his own situation without recognizing it directly. By the end of the consultation, a fine sheen of sweat had appeared on his forehead. This has been extremely informative, I said as we concluded. I'd like some time to consider my options before proceeding. Of course, Walter said, handing me his card. Take all the time you need. Family decisions shouldn't be rushed. As Caleb escorted me back to reception, he cleared his throat. Ms. Jenkins, if you don't mind my asking, have you discussed these concerns with your son directly? I paused, meeting his eyes fully. Would that matter? In your experience, do people change their character simply because they're confronted with their failings? His expression flickered. Uncertainty, perhaps, or defensiveness. I find that people often behave better when given the opportunity. How charitable of you to think so, I replied. I've found that people show you who they are in moments of crisis. Everything else is performance. Something in my tone must have unsettled him. He extended his hand mechanically. Please reach out if you have any additional questions. I took his hand, my son's hand, warm and familiar despite everything. And for a brief, dizzying moment, I almost broke character, almost pulled him close and whispered, "It's me, your mother, the failure you discarded." Instead, I squeezed his hand professionally and said, "I certainly will, Mr. Morgan. You've given me much to think about." Outside, I walked 6 blocks before the adrenaline wore off and my knees began to shake. I found a cafe, ordered a cup of tea I could barely afford, and called Rita. "How did it go?" she asked without preamble. "He didn't recognize me," I said, a strange mixture of pain and power in my voice. "Not at all. And how do you feel about that?" I considered the question carefully, like I've confirmed something I needed to know, which is that I was right to stop seeing myself through his eyes. I took a deep breath, and that what comes next is entirely justified. What came next began with a simple Google search. Hartwell, Pierce & Associates Annual Charity Gala. The firm's website prominently featured last year's event, an elaborate affair at the Westport Yacht Club, where partners, associates, and clients mingled with local judges and politicians. This year's event was scheduled for next month. Tickets were $500 each, with proceeds benefiting a legal aid foundation the firm had established. I couldn't afford a ticket, but I didn't need one. That evening, back in my motel room, I opened my laptop and navigated to a job posting site. Under food service and event staffing, I found what I was looking for. Experienced servers needed for upcoming gala events. Westport Yacht Club, $18 plus tips. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I contemplated the magnitude of what I was planning. This wasn't just about witnessing Caleb in his element or making him momentarily uncomfortable. This was about systematically dismantling the image he'd worked so hard to cultivate, the image that was too pristine to accommodate his struggling mother. I thought again of his words, "You're bad for my image." With cold determination, I completed the application, attaching a resume that emphasized my organizational skills and attention to detail rather than my 30 years in corporate accounting. 2 days later, I received a call inviting me to an interview. 3 days after that, I was hired as part of the serving staff for the yacht club's spring events, including the upcoming charity gala. For the first time in months, I slept without anxiety. Not because my problems were solved. I was still essentially homeless, still financially precarious, but because I had purpose now, direction, a clear path forward. My son had taught me an invaluable lesson. Appearances were everything in his world, and I was about to become the ghost in his carefully constructed machine. Working at the Westport Yacht Club was an education in privilege. During the 3 weeks leading up to the charity gala, I served cocktails to hedge fund managers discussing multi-million-dollar deals, carried canapés to socialites planning their summer in the Hamptons, and cleared wine glasses for politicians making backroom arrangements. I became adept at invisibility, the particular skill of service workers who must be present but unnoticed. I kept my head down, wore the mandated black and white uniform, and listened. People speak freely around those they consider furniture. It was during a Thursday evening corporate reception that I first saw Caleb at the club. He was with a group of associates, laughing too loudly at a senior partner's joke, his hand resting possessively on the lower back of a sleek blonde woman. "Another round for the Hartwell table," the banquet manager instructed me, nodding toward their group. I kept my face angled away as I approached with the tray of drinks. Caleb barely glanced at me as he took a whiskey, his attention focused on the partner. "Absolutely brilliant strategy, sir. The opposing counsel never saw it coming. That's why we hired you, Morgan," the partner replied. "Sharp instincts, quick on your feet." "Speaking of sharp," another associate interjected, "have you all met Caleb's new girlfriend? Melissa's on the board at the Children's Museum. Quite the power couple in the making." The blonde woman, Melissa, smiled with practiced modesty. "Hardly, though we did just secure a major donation for the new wing." "Melissa's being modest," Caleb said. "Her family practically built this town. Morgan and Whiting has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" The table laughed appreciatively. I remained invisible, collecting empty glasses, noting how easily my son had transferred his surname from me to this woman he'd probably known for months at most. I wondered if he'd told her about his mother, the failure who might tarnish his image, or if I'd been edited out of his narrative entirely. As I turned to leave, Melissa said something that made me pause. "By the way, Caleb, did you ever reach your mother? You mentioned you were worried about her." A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. "Not yet. I think she's just being stubborn, honestly. You know how older people can be when they feel slighted." Slighted. As if his rejection had been a minor social faux pas rather than an act of cruelty that had left me homeless. "Well, I'd love to meet her sometime," Melissa said, her tone suggesting obligatory politeness rather than genuine interest. "Sure," Caleb replied vaguely. When things settled down, I walked away, my hands steady despite the rage building inside me. In that moment, I knew exactly what needed to happen at the charity gala. It wasn't enough to embarrass Caleb or make him momentarily uncomfortable. I needed to dismantle the foundation of lies he'd built his new life upon. The night of the gala arrived with perfect early summer weather, warm with a gentle breeze coming off the water. The yacht club gleamed with white lights and floral arrangements. Men in tailored tuxedos and women in designer gowns arrived in luxury cars, handing their keys to valets with practiced nonchalance. In the staff preparation room, I changed into the formal serving attire: crisp white shirt, black bow tie, black vest, and slacks. I pinned my hair back severely and applied minimal makeup, another layer of invisibility. "Remember, folks," the event manager instructed us, "this is a high-profile evening. These people donate thousands to the club. Impeccable service, invisible presence." We nodded in unison, professional servants preparing to facilitate an evening of wealthy self-congratulation. The cocktail hour began at 7. I circulated with trays of champagne, moving silently between clusters of Caleb's colleagues and their spouses. I spotted him immediately, holding court near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the marina. Melissa at his side in a midnight blue gown that probably cost more than 3 months of my former mortgage payments. I kept my distance during the first hour, serving the opposite side of the room. I watched as he worked the crowd, shaking hands, laughing at the right moments, placing his hand on Melissa's back as he introduced her to important contacts. He looked utterly at home in this world of wealth and power. At 8:30, dinner was served. I was assigned to tables 11 through 13, thankfully not including Caleb's table, which was positioned prominently near the front. As guests ate, partners from the firm took turns at the podium, highlighting the charity work their foundation had accomplished over the past year. "And now," announced Walter Pierce, the senior partner I'd met during my consultation, "I'd like to invite one of our most promising young associates to say a few words about our newest legal aid initiative. Caleb Morgan has been instrumental in developing our program to assist elderly clients with housing issues." My hand froze in the act of pouring water. Housing issues for the elderly. The irony was so blatant, I nearly laughed aloud. Caleb approached the podium to enthusiastic applause. He adjusted the microphone with the confidence of someone accustomed to public speaking. "Thank you, Walter, and good evening, everyone. I'm honored to introduce our new Elder Justice Initiative, a program close to my heart." Close to his heart. I gripped the water pitcher tighter. Too often our senior citizens face housing insecurity, predatory lending, and financial abuse. Sometimes from the very institutions that should protect them. Sometimes from family members who take advantage of their vulnerability. He paused, scanning the audience with practiced sincerity. I stepped back, deeper into server territory, though I needn't have worried. His gaze would never drop to the serving staff. "My own grandmother faced similar issues in her later years," he continued, "which is why I've personally committed to providing pro bono hours to this initiative. His grandmother, my mother, had died when he was 12. He had no memory of her financial situation, no personal connection to elder housing issues. He was fabricating a backstory to make himself appear compassionate, committed, because everyone deserves dignity in their golden years," he concluded. "Everyone deserves a home and family they can rely on." The crowd applauded warmly. Melissa beamed up at him with admiration. Walter Pierce clapped him on the shoulder as he returned to his seat, the picture of mentorship and approval. I moved mechanically through the dessert service, my mind racing. The speech had clarified something essential. Caleb wasn't simply ashamed of me. He was actively constructing an alternative reality, one where he was not only successful but morally superior, compassionate, devoted to family. He was erasing his actual behavior and replacing it with a noble fiction. This wasn't just hypocrisy. It was a complete denial of reality, my reality, our shared history, the debt he owed. As coffee was served, I made my decision. I approached the event manager, who was directing staff near the kitchen entrance. "I need to take my break," I said quietly. She frowned. "Now? We're in the middle of service." "It's urgent," I insisted. "Medical, 5 minutes, that's all." She sighed. "Fine, 5 minutes. Then I need you back for the auction portion." I slipped into the restroom, locking the door behind me. From my pocket, I took out a small makeup bag. Nothing elaborate, just enough to transform my invisible server appearance. I removed the severe hairpin, letting my silver-streaked hair fall to my shoulders. I applied deeper lipstick, a touch of blush, subtle eyeshadow. I loosened my bow tie and undid the top button of my shirt. Small changes, but enough. I looked in the mirror and saw Karen Morgan again. Not Eleanor Jenkins, the client. Not the anonymous server, but myself. A woman who had sacrificed everything for her son. A woman who had been discarded when she became inconvenient. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and left the restroom. Instead of returning to the kitchen, I walked directly toward the main event space, where the charity auction was about to begin. It was time for Caleb to face the reality he'd been so desperate to hide. The auction was beginning as I entered the ballroom. A local news anchor who volunteered as auctioneer was taking her position at the podium, her voice bright with practiced enthusiasm. "Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've all been waiting for. Tonight's proceeds will directly fund legal aid for those who cannot afford representation. Let's open our hearts and wallets for this wonderful cause." I circled the perimeter of the room, moving with purpose but not rushing. A few guests glanced at me curiously, a server walking through the main space rather than hugging the walls. moving with too much confidence for staff. I kept my eyes fixed on Caleb, who was whispering something in Melissa's ear, making her laugh softly. "Our first item," the auctioneer announced, "is a weekend getaway at the exclusive Windermere Resort in Vermont. 3 nights in the presidential suite, spa treatments included. Shall we start the bidding at $5,000? Hands rose around the room as I positioned myself near the bar, just 20 feet from Caleb's table. I picked up an empty serving tray, a prop to justify my presence. $10,000 to the gentleman in the blue bow tie. Do I hear 11? I watched my son as he observed the bidding. He wasn't participating, perhaps saving his resources for a later item, or perhaps $10,000 weekend getaways were still beyond his means despite his apparent success. His expression was calm, satisfied. A man in his element, surrounded by wealth and power, his attractive girlfriend at his side, his mentor nearby. "Sold for $15,000. Congratulations, Mr. Harrington." Applause rippled through the room. The auctioneer moved on to the next item, a private wine tasting with a renowned sommelier. I waited, watching as the bidding escalated, as champagne flowed, as Caleb leaned over to whisper something to Walter Pierce, who nodded approvingly. My moment would come. I just needed the right item. "Next up," the auctioneer continued after selling the wine tasting for $12,000. "We have something truly special. A pro bono legal package from Hartwell, Pierce and Associates, focusing on elder law and estate planning. 10 hours with one of their top associates, valued at over $20,000. Caleb straightened in his chair. Walter Pierce nodded at him encouragingly. "And I'm told that the associate handling this package will be none other than Caleb Morgan, who spoke so movingly earlier about the Elder Justice Initiative. Shall we start the bidding at $5,000? Several hands went up immediately. I set down my tray on a nearby table and moved closer to the front, to the edge of the seating area. From there, I raised my hand. 5,000 from the gentleman in the corner, and, yes, 6,000 from the lady in the back. The auctioneer hadn't recognized me as staff. My small transformations had been enough to blur that line. I raised my hand again. 7,000 from the lady in the back. Caleb was scanning the room, trying to see who was bidding on his services. His expression was pleasant, professional, eager to identify a potential high-value client. His eyes skipped over me once, then returned, narrowing slightly in confusion. 8,000 from Mr. Dawson. I raised my hand again, holding Caleb's gaze as recognition slowly dawned on his face. 9,000 from our determined bidder in the back. His face drained of color. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles whitening. Melissa noticed his reaction and touched his arm, concern creasing her perfect features. 10,000 from Mrs. Ellis! Do I hear 11? I raised my hand again, never breaking eye contact with my son. He was frozen now, staring at me with a mixture of shock and horror. 11,000 from our mystery bidder. Going once? Another hand went up across the room. 12,000 from Mr. Dawson. Going once. I raised my hand a final time. 13,000. We have 13,000 from the lady in the back. Going once. Going twice. Sold. Congratulations, ma'am. Please see one of our staff members to complete your donation and collect your certificate. Applause filled the room. Caleb remained motionless, his face ashen. Melissa was speaking to him, clearly concerned by his reaction, but he didn't seem to hear her. I walked forward, moving directly toward their table with measured steps. The room continued around me, the auctioneer introducing the next item, guests murmuring and bidding, servers circulating with coffee and dessert wine. But between Caleb and me, time seemed suspended. I stopped directly in front of his table. Melissa looked up at me, confusion evident in her expression. "Caleb?" she asked. "Do you know this woman?" For a long moment he said nothing, his throat working as he struggled to find words. Finally, he managed a hoarse whisper. "Mom." "Hello, Caleb," I said, my voice perfectly steady. "I believe I just purchased 10 hours of your professional time. How fortunate that you specialize in elder housing issues. As you know, I've been experiencing some housing insecurity myself." Melissa's eyes widened. "Your mother? But I thought..." What did you think, Melissa? I asked, turning my gaze to her. That I was away on a luxury cruise? Living comfortably in retirement? Or did Caleb tell you I was dead? That would certainly be cleaner than the truth. Mom, please. Caleb finally found his voice, low and urgent. This isn't the place. No? I interrupted. I thought image was everything here. Isn't that why you couldn't let a failure like me stay with you? Because your colleagues might discover your mother lost her job, lost her home, might discover the truth behind your success? Walter Pierce was watching now, his brow furrowed. Others at nearby tables were turning to observe the unexpected drama unfolding. What truth? Melissa asked, looking between us. I smiled thinly. Ask Caleb how he afforded Columbia law. Ask him about the second mortgage on my house, the house that was foreclosed on 3 months ago. Ask him what he said when I had nowhere else to go. Caleb's face had transitioned from shock to anger. You're making a scene, he hissed. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Yes, I agreed calmly. I suppose I am bad for your image, especially when your image is built on lies. I turned to Walter Pierce. Mr. Pierce, I believe we've met before. I consulted with you and Caleb about estate planning, under the name Eleanor Jenkins. Recognition flashed across the senior partner's face, followed by confusion. Ms. Jenkins? I don't understand. There is no Eleanor Jenkins, I explained. I'm Karen Morgan, Caleb's mother. I wanted to see how he spoke about family obligations when he didn't know who he was talking to. It was quite educational. The table had fallen silent. Around us, the auction continued, but our small drama had captured the attention of at least 20 people in the immediate vicinity. Mom, Caleb said, rising from his chair, desperation edging into his voice. Let's talk privately. Please, I can explain everything. There's nothing to explain, I replied. Your actions were perfectly clear, as were your words. I reached into my pocket and withdrew the charity auction certificate that a confused staff member had handed me moments earlier. I placed it on the table in front of him. I won't be using your services after all. Consider my $13,000 a final gift, adding to the hundreds of thousands I've already given you. I met his eyes steadily. I'm done investing in someone who sees me as a liability. I turned to leave, but Melissa's voice stopped me. Wait, she said, her expression troubled. What exactly happened between you two? I looked back at her, seeing genuine confusion in her eyes. Ask him what happens when the people who raised you need help. Ask him if he believes his success belongs to him alone. Ask him if he thinks family obligations end when they become inconvenient. Without waiting for a response, I walked away, my back straight, my steps unwavering. Behind me, I heard the murmur of voices rising, questions being asked, Caleb's desperate attempts to explain. I didn't look back. In the staff room, I collected my belongings, changed out of the server uniform, and left through the service entrance. The night air was cool against my skin as I walked to the bus stop a quarter mile from the yacht club. My phone buzzed with text messages. Caleb, finally finding words now that his carefully constructed world was crumbling. I didn't read them. There was nothing he could say that would matter now. 2 days later, a law firm, not Caleb's, contacted me. A partner had been at the gala, had witnessed what happened, and wanted to offer me a position as an office manager. We value experience and loyalty, she said. And it sounds like you have both in spades. A week after that, Eliza called. Caleb told me what happened, she said. I've never seen him like this, Mom. He wants to make things right. Some things can't be made right, I replied. He's offering to let you stay with him, to help you find a new place, to pay off your debts. He says he understands now what he did to you. I'm sure he does, I said. Now that others know. Now that it's affected his precious image. Mom, I have a job now, I interrupted. And a small apartment. I don't need his help. I don't want it. There was silence on the line. Then, he's suffering. Good, I said, surprising myself with the cold finality in my voice. Now he knows how it feels. I hung up, knowing I should feel something. Guilt, perhaps, or sadness for the relationship that would never be repaired. Instead, I felt only a quiet certainty that justice had been served. Not through courts or lawyers, but through truth laid bare. My son had built his success on my sacrifice, then discarded me when I became inconvenient. He had called me a failure to my face, then used fictitious family devotion to burnish his professional image. Now he would live with the consequences of his choices, with the knowledge that no amount of money or success could erase what he had done, what he had revealed himself to be in that moment of crisis. Some debts can never be repaid. Some betrayals can never be forgiven. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in months, unburdened by false hopes or the weight of undeserved loyalty. In the morning, I woke to sunshine streaming through the window of my small but dignified apartment, ready to begin again. This time, with no illusions about what family really means, and with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that my son would spend the rest of his life trying to rebuild what he had so carelessly destroyed.